First came the big pre-poll announcement from Congress President Rahul Gandhi.
शौक मत होना, अभी धमाका बजने जा रहा है। 20% सबसे गरीब परिवारों को हर साल 72,000 रुपए देने जा रही है।
But what the so-called Dhamakedar scheme lacked was clarity, which left many questioning whether the minimum income plan was a mere pre-poll jumla or could it be a game changer. Today, former Finance Minister and senior Congress leader P. Chidambaram defended the scheme.
We have consulted enough economists, enough experts in the subject, and all of them are broadly agreed that India has the capacity to implement a scheme of this kind.
He added that there was enough data available to identify the poorest of the poor or the beneficiaries of the income support plan.
There is data gathered by state governments in distributing ration cards. There is data farmers collected for the crop insurance schemes of the UPA government and the NDA government. And we have enough talent in this country to analyze the data and identify the bottom 5 crore families.
But even the former finance minister from Congress party has left many questions unanswered. So tonight, Mirror Now asks, how will the scheme identify the poor? Can India afford Congress Nyay scheme? Can India foot the bill for the Nyay scheme and other government subsidies? How will Congress ensure the scheme is corruption-free? Is Congress pushing a half-baked scheme to win votes? Let's debate.
Well, this was the much-awaited clarity that Mr. Chidambaram offered reporters in Chennai today. But it hasn't really answered a lot of the questions we've been asking about this scheme since it was announced. On the show with me today, Gopal Agarwal for the BJP, Mohammad Khan for the Congress, Professor Arun Kumar, Chair Professor of the Indian Institute of Social Sciences. We also have with us CM Vasudev, former Finance Secretary. Mohan Guruswamy is a senior economist. I welcome all of you to this conversation. Thank you for joining us. We're expecting the Congress spokesperson to join us shortly. But opening statements from each of our guests in the meantime. Mr. Guruswamy, we talked about this a couple of days ago when it was announced by Rahul Gandhi. Mr. Chidambaram has said he's offered us clarity, but there isn't too much clarity. The question, for example, how will you identify the poor in this country wasn't really answered. He said, and I quote, there is enough data. There is the SECC data, data gathered by state governments on ration cards, data collected on farmers for crop insurance, both by UPA and NDA, and data collected for the universal healthcare schemes of both governments. We have enough data and talent in the country to find the bottom 5%. Are you convinced, Mr. Guruswamy?
I agree with him. You know, one of the rare times when I agree with Chidambaram, but I think the data is there. It all has to be put together, and there would be a little effort involved, but it is there. So it's not an insurmountable task. We have ration cards, we have yellow cards, BPL cards. We give kerosene on PDS, we give rice on PDS, wheat on PDS, dal on PDS. There are so many ways of identifying people below the poverty line. The estimates of the government always based on reducing poverty. So obviously government knows number of people who are below the poverty line. So there are lots of ways of doing it. I think it calls for a little effort, and rather than saying that it can't be done, it can be done. And we should be prepared to put in that effort to give these people identification cards. And it's only going to be, it's fixed, the upper limit is fixed. You're only going to have 50 million people. So it can be done and should be done.
Okay. Same question to Mr. Vasudev. Mr. Vasudev, do you believe that this identification, this information is enough? Are you convinced? And we'll go piece by piece. So my first question is about identifying the poor. Has Mr. Chidambaram answered the question we were asking 2 days ago?
No, I don't think he has left many questions unanswered, and probably whatever he has said has raised more questions. For example, he says it is going to be jointly implemented by the center and the states. It will be implemented in stages. And then till the other day, we were told that this is a top-up scheme, that if it is 12,000, if somebody is earning less than that, it will be topped up. Now we are told it is a flat thing for anybody who is earning who is below 20% category of the poorest people. What about the person who's 21st? Or you're saying you're going to give him 12,000 rupees if somebody is already earning 6,000, what do you do? So there are a lot of questions which are left unanswered. So a lot of practical problems, identification of the prospective beneficiaries. It is going to be difficult. It is going to open so many issues for corruption and this and that. And for what? Because after all, practicality is only one aspect. I think a more important question is certainly affordability and desirability.
Yes.
And I think on both these grounds, there are so many holes in the scheme that I don't know why Mr. Chidambaram, who in his period as finance minister, I had the privilege of working with him, was known as a fiscal purist. There was an occasion when there was a pay commission award, and some ministers in the cabinet wanted that award to be sort of topped up by some extra goodies for the staff. He refused. He said, I will not attend the cabinet meeting if this is put up. So he was such a fiscal purist, and coming from him, I think maybe politics is again driving a lot of economics, and when he says we have consulted enough economists before framing this scheme, I don't know what questions were posed. I heard today Mr. Raghuram Rajan saying that he was consulted. He said that fiscal space can be created. Now, how can it be created? Can it be created by giving up some existing subsidies? But the scheme says nothing will be given up. So how the fiscal space is going to become created? And if fiscal space is created without eliminating any other subsidies, then there are no free lunches. So what will be squeezed out? What investment? Is it going to be at the cost of growth? So I feel that instead of removing poverty, it may perhaps make poverty more entrenched, because you are not making people be productive and earn what they want. The doles have not removed poverty anywhere in the world. So the only sort of antidote to poverty is growth. And if you are going to squeeze out money for consumption expenditure and leave less and less for investment, and without investment you cannot have growth. So, and without growth you cannot eradicate poverty. These palliatives can be given, but then you are postponing the process. We have done so well over the years with economic growth having grown up.
Yes, allow me, Mr. Vasudev, to bring in Professor Kumar as well. Professor Kumar, Mr. Vasudev saying that this scheme announced by the Congress party, and we'll try and get Mohammad Khan's attention as well. This scheme announced by the Congress party, he said, is anti-growth. And the question of affordability and desirability were not really answered by Mr. Chidambaram, and it leaves a lot still grey and ununderstood. Do you agree with him that this, as it stands right now, is not clear enough for us to understand it?
There are a lot of gaps in what has been announced. This is undoubtedly true. However, let's look at the basics. Because of demonetization and GST, the unorganized sector was damaged very badly, and that has aggravated poverty in the country, and that's why you see a lot of farmers protest, youth protest for employment, etc. going on, because a lot of jobs have been lost, as the data seems to suggest. Farmers have lost income because, they're not getting the price they should get, whereas the cost has risen. So in other words, poverty is aggravated, and that's why all parties are trying to appease these sections of the population. Because politically there's a lot of discontent that's building up in the nation. So I think it's good that we have some such proposal being discussed across all parties. In a democracy, we must discuss when there's distress, and we must do something to rectify it. The question is how to do it. Now, the present government is trying to do it in one way by proposing that we'll give 6,000 rupees per year to the bottom 12 crore people in the rural areas, but then they don't cover the urban areas. They do give something to the unorganized sector, but that's only for a period after, they retire. That's after 60, so nothing much now. So I think what the Congress has done is it has said that we will cater to all the poor, whether it be rural or urban, and therefore the question is, how do you identify them? That's certainly a problem. There's no, because we don't have income distribution data in the country, so we don't know who's below a certain poverty line. and what should be our poverty line, because the figure of 72,000 that's going to be given to any family so that they can get at least 12,000 rupees per per person, that figure actually would say that it's much above the poverty line figure. So in that sense, maybe you'll have many more than 5 crore people who would actually qualify for that. And therefore, the amount of money that may need to be spent may be more than what is being asked for 5 crore 72,000 rupees per family, if the number is much more than 5 crore,
yes,
because you're going above the poverty line figure, So that's one issue, that identification is a problem. The next issue will be resources.
Yes.
Now, any economy, when we think about the budget, we are thinking of expenditures and revenues. The deficit is the difference between the expenditure and the revenue. If you are going to increase expenditures, then you must try and find sources of revenue. Now, the sources of revenue that are possible in today's situation, where the disparities are very high, where wealth is getting concentrated in the hands of very few, as the Oxfam report showed, 9 people have more wealth than 55% people at the bottom. And the earlier World Inequality report showed that 1% of the population has 70% of the wealth in white economy. If that is the situation, then a wealth tax is a very eminently doable thing, where you can raise almost 2.5 lakh crores from...
Professor Kumar, let me ask these questions of Mohammad Khan, and I want to bring in Gopal Agarwal as well. Mohammad Khan, a couple of questions that have come that I will bring to you from our panels. We have Mohan Guruswamy, we have CM Vasudev and Professor Kumar, whom you just heard speaking. First question is the question of identification. Now, Mr. Chidambaram has not really answered this question. He said that we have the talent and there are various databases that we can go through. But when you say the bottom 5%, the poorest of our country, what is that definition? How do you define the poorest of the country? Are you going to go by income?
What is the definition?
What is the definition? What is the definition of poor in the country? And how will you arrive at this bottom 5% that you're talking about?
Yes, Faye. Yes, Faye. So, identification of the poor has often been a challenge, especially while devising socio-economic policies. But in this case, there are 3 things that I would like to present to your viewers. The first is this exercise of the identification of those at the very margins of poverty has been done by the Suresh Tendulkar committee. And they have arrived at a certain formulation, which is, if you recall, they had said, I think 6,000 rupees as the average income below which someone would be classified as absolutely poor. In addition to that, Arun Kumar Sahab and I were on a debate the other day, and I pointed out in 2013, we embarked upon an exercise to collect data in this regard called the SECC survey, the Socio-economic Caste Census. It was, of course, meant to acquire a greater degree of information, not just income, but the results of that survey were very illuminating. And I think that they will also be used to arrive at a conclusion as to who will benefit from the scheme and who won't. Thirdly, I remember in 2012 and 13, the UPA government was working on the Food Security Act, and the exact same problem arose. I was fortunate enough to be a part of the drafting committee, and I remember renowned economists like John Reyes Sahab and Ritika Kheda ji pointed out that to identify these people, come up with an exclusion criteria, which is what we did. Now, what is an exclusion criteria? The idea is that if you possess certain items, or you are, say, in a government job, you have a scooter, you have a certain amount of land, you will be excluded from the scheme. So you develop exclusion criteria to arrive at this. Of course, these 3 things that I've presented before you, Faye, the Suresh Tendulkar committee report, the SECC data, and the experiments with the FSA, these are just ideas at this point which we will use to build upon this scheme. I hope that is a fair answer to this question.
Effectively, you said you don't know, or it has not been decided yet.
No, I haven't said I don't know. Well, Faye, I would say that there are much smarter people than me who are actually working on this.
Yes, but those much smarter people are not the ones announcing schemes before elections.
That they have much more data that they have access to.
So, okay, let me ask you another question. Now, Mr. Chidambaram and the Congress party, who has been a critique of this government.
Problem with the scheme?
Yes. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Otherwise, we're going to spend the whole 1 hour just deciding that. Mr. Chidambaram then went on to say that the 2% or the 1.8% of GDP, which will be the total expense of this, will come from the growth. He did say that right now we have, we have a certain 200 lakh crore rupees, which is our total GDP. He expected that to go up to 400 lakh crore rupees fairly soon. He said we're a country that's growing at about 7%. Now, this is a party that has constantly criticized the current government for the lack of growth, for the lack of encouragement of industry, for the fudging of GDP numbers, which he said in his press conference as well. So on what growth estimates are you basing this assumption?
That's correct.
So what you're saying effectively that the BJP has done such a fantastic job that you now will have, India is now in a position to give away 2% of the GDP. Aren't you then through this acknowledging the BJP's economic policy over the last 5 years?
Okay, that's a fair question. Now, the truth is, of course, we have an issue with the way this government presents its figures. We know for a fact that the government revised the base year not once but twice, Faye, to project higher figures while delivering lower growth. Of course, there is growth. It is an economic truth that there is a certain amount of growth. But what we say is, you squandered the growth potential. The amount of growth, the pace at which it was growing under the UPA is nowhere close. The pace at which it was growing under the UPA is not matched by you. It's not even close to the figures put up by the UPA. It is a very different argument to say there is no growth and to say that the growth that you put out is far below the potential of our economy, and the latter is our argument. Our economy is driven not just by Mr. Narendra Modi, it is driven by the people of India who produce goods and services. That is the very definition of GDP. And these goods and services are irrespective of the government. Growth है, मगर जिस स्तर पे हो सकती थी वहाँ नहीं पहुँची फे. And इसीलिए they put out false data, revise the years so that the base effect appears higher and present these figures before you. Nonetheless, there are other ways as well. I noticed that you had interviewed Mr. Raghuram Rajan yesterday, and I was fortunate, I caught a little bit of that. I wanted to point out that in his book, The Third Pillar, on page 323, he actually presents various options for how you will fund a universal basic income scheme. For example, he talks about the rationalization of subsidies. He talks about the fact that there can be a harmonization of indirect taxes. He talks about what Arun Kumar Saab was talking about earlier, that you could conceive of something like a wealth tax for a very select elite few. Now, all of these are very good measures. And again, Faye, don't knock it until it is out. Because again, remember, and this is very important.
Khan, it is my job. Okay, I understand your argument, but it is my job to knock it because the audience needs to know if this plan is good enough to vote on. Now, Gopal Agarwal will rebut.
Let me say the following.
Yes.
That's fair, but let me say the following. Then let me just say the following. Let me just say the following. One sentence. In 2005, the exact same arguments that we hear today with regard to percentage of GDP, where will the money come from, etc., were raised against MG Narega as well. We found the money, Faye. We've done it before. We've done it several times before. We will do it again. All it requires is political will.
All right. So, okay. Then tell me something. In the 10 years of prosperity that the UPA, actually brags about, why didn't you do this then?
Yeah. So, Faye, that's a very good question. And I'm so glad you brought it up because today, the Indian Express published a story that we've been talking about since September of last year. In September of last year, the Oxford University and United Nations published a report on multidimensional poverty. They studied the years between 2004 and 2015. And do you know what they arrived at as a conclusion? They said that the most number of people across the world had been lifted out of poverty by the UPA schemes, 271 million, a figure that is not matched by anywhere else in the world. These are amazing findings, and they're a testament to the UPA's pro-poor policies. So again, this is not me. Don't take my word for it as a Congress spokesperson. Read the report. Read the Indian Express story that has come out today.
All right. Let me allow Gopal Agarwal to come in. He's been listening very patiently, and then my three experts will bring in their rebuttals. Gopal Agarwal, go ahead. Your rebuttal to Mohammad Khan, if you have one.
No, Faye, we got very good questions from you, but very bad answers from the Congress spokesperson. The same thing was Mr. Chidambaram press conference. We were all expecting some concrete steps on the whole scheme. But I agree with Mr. Chidambaram is that he said that we have the talent. We had the talent in 2007 with DRDO, but we had to wait for 2019 and Mr. Modi to take decision that we were able to do such thing today. I would like to congratulate
stay on point, Mr. Agarwal. Stay on point.
The issue is you were asking, the issue is we are all asking, can we, do we have the talent to identify, will we able to identify? The question before is that what we have to identify, the issue is not clear. Whom they want to give the schemes, what will be the criteria? The basic question everybody is asking Mr. Chidambaram, Mr. Rahul Gandhi, Mr. Surjewala is, what is the scheme? What is the basic structure? Whom will you give? What is the amount? What will be the criteria? If they are not clear, they themselves are not clear, so how will they say that we will identify? And they are saying that we took 6 months to think on this. We have discussed with all the economists. If Mr. Raghuram Rajan has such a talent that after discussion with Mr. Raghuram Rajan and 6 months of brainstorming, they come out with a press conference as useless as Mr. Chidambaram's today, and Mr. Surjewala and Mr. Rahul Gandhi day before yesterday, then I have extremely sorry that this country, if left to these economists, so-called economists, it will neither progress in the economic field, neither it will progress in the nationalist field, neither it can fight the terrorists. There is a failure on every.
All right. No, I understand your argument, Mr. Agarwal. I just want to understand, what is the nationalist field you refer to?
Well, you have been fighting
you give me time.
terrorists.
No, I patiently, yes. Let me finish the whole.
Okay, all right. Finish your argument. Yes,
I had patiently heard everybody. The issue is that if you want to give benefit of anything, you have to identify the beneficiaries. They have not identified, they have not clarified the scheme. The second important thing is, you also pointed out, is that on the implementation of the scheme, they are banking on 2 or 3 main important points. That is, one is the direct benefit transfer and the bank account that has been established over patiently and focused way by Mr. Narendra Modi over these 5 years. They are banking on that system, which is leakage-proof, which is corruption-free, which is leakage-proof. So they should appreciate that Mr. Modi has implemented an ecosystem where we can transfer government beneficiary schemes to the common man without corruption and to the targeted person. Second thing is, you also pointed out, and I also want to put before everybody, is that they are also depending on the economic growth that we have brought over 5 years. We were in 2014 in the fragile 5 economies. Inflation was high, deficit was very high, corruption was high, ease of doing business was very low. So from there, now we are the 6th largest economy in the world, fastest growing economy in the world, highest reserves of foreign exchange. Globally, we have a very strong reform agenda that the world is appreciating. And financial inclusion program of Mr. Modi has been appreciated globally by the World Bank and everybody. We have seen over 5 years the best financial inclusion.
All right. Mr. Gopal Agarwal, I want to bring in my experts for a rebuttal. I've given you more than your fair share of time.
And made a big difference. So both these things, when the Congress and UPA is depending on these 2 things, good economic growth, good economic progress, and good delivery system, they should appreciate that we will use Mr. Modi's...
Okay, Mr. Agarwal. So here are the questions we are asking. I'm going to just point them out again. How will the scheme... Yes.
We are not against any schemes. If they want to do good for the poor, we appreciate them. But tell us how you will do it.
Tell us how you will do it. Absolutely. So I'm just going to reiterate the questions we are asking this evening. How will the Congress identify the poor? What is the definition of poor? How will you arrive at this bottom 5%? Second point, how will you make sure that the scheme is corruption-free and there are no leakages of the money that you are transferring and it's going to the right people? And finally, can India afford this scheme? Now, to Mr. Mohan Guruswamy, you first said you agree that there is talent and there's enough data to identify. Do you, first of all, believe that India can afford this scheme at 1.8% of our GDP? And we know Mr. Chidambaram argued that this is dharma and this is something we must do. But is this the way to remove poverty from the country? Do you believe that we can afford it? Mr. Guruswamy.
We give away almost 18 to 20% of our GDP on subsidies. There are various kinds of subsidies. Direct subsidies, indirect subsidies, merited subsidies, unmerited subsidies. When power companies make a loss, that's a subsidy. When Air India makes a loss, that's a subsidy. The public sector companies make losses, they're subsidies. So all these are subsidies. Milk is subsidized, sugar is subsidized, wheat is subsidized, PDS is subsidized. So there are lots of subsidies there. So it's a good amount of the GDP. Now we're talking not of 1.8% of GDP, we're talking about 1.3% of GDP. That is the amount which will go for this. And that can be easily accumulated. After all, if you put a 2% cess on people with, with wealth of about 2.5 crores, you will get 1.2% of GDP in taxes. These numbers have been worked out.
Mr. Guruswamy, 3.6 lakh crore is 13% of GDP, not 1.3.
One at a time, please, gentlemen. Mr.
It's not 3.6 lakh crores. It's not 3.6 lakh crores.
13% GDP को आप 1.3
It's not 3.6 lakh crores.
It was quoted by Mr. Rahul Gandhi.
Okay, Mr. Goswami, finish your argument, please. The question that I'm fundamentally asking is this. I don't believe there's anyone here who says we shouldn't be helping the poor and we shouldn't be saving children from hunger. The question is, how successful do you think this scheme will be on the ground, or will it just be another half-baked scheme that leaks money?
I also agree we should support the poor.
Absolutely. Everybody believes we should support the poor. Mr. Guruswamy, will it work on the ground?
Good, you agree. Good, you agree. Of course it will work on the ground. There will be some leakages. On everything there's leakages. But it will work on the ground. It will make, people will be empowered to ask it. People have this right to information there. They have bank accounts. And, all these things are there. And the money will go directly. So the leakages of Manrega will not be there. So I think you should give it a try. Rather, the idea is not a bad idea. UBI has been around in the air for a long time. Arvind Subramaniam had it in the economic survey in 2017. Yes. Why did this government put it in their survey? And they said, we should be looking at this. They didn't do it because, they couldn't summon the political will and courage for it. Because, they have been brought up in such a way that, all this is waste of money. This is a state which gives its employees, 23 million employees, 11.4% of GDP salaries. Every year, the dearness allowance increases by 1.2% of GDP.
Sure.
And that's about 10%. Every year it goes up.
Okay, rebuttal from Mr. Vasudev.
And the same people sit here and say, this is bad. This is bad.
Okay. Rebuttal from Mr. Vasudev. Mr. Vasudev, since Mohammad Khan quoted Raghuram Rajan also has written in his book that socialism doesn't always work, that you have to skill people, you have to educate them, you have to provide them with healthcare, you have to provide them with jobs and opportunities. Now, this is not a solution for any of those things. Do you believe this will work on the ground, and do you have a rebuttal for Mohammad Khan, Mr. Vasudev?
I'll call you back.
We are focusing a bit too much on the practicality and the affordability issues. Of course, there are a lot of problems in practicality in implementing the scheme. Everybody knows, and it is not going to be easy. And so far as affordability is concerned, of course, everything can be affordable in that sense, what Mohan is saying. But then, what is the cost of that affordability? What are you squeezing out in the process? If you want to run a scheme of this type and reduce the expenditure on education and health and on infrastructure and on other investment, of course you can do it. But then are you serving the objective for which you are doing all this? That is to eradicate poverty. As I said earlier, up to the 1980s, up to 1991, we had a growth rate of Hindu rate, as it was called, 3 to 3.5%. And 40 to 50% of the population was below poverty line. 91, it was the Congress government at that time, Dr. Manmohan Singh was the finance minister. When the economy was liberalized, the energies of the private sector were unleashed, and we reached the 7 to 8% growth trajectory. And look what has happened. The poverty numbers have come down to 20%. So the real antidote to poverty is faster growth. That is the way to take people out of poverty, not by giving doles. Have we seen any country in the world which has been able to eradicate poverty by giving doles? Every country which has eradicated poverty has done through the growth process. So we have to do everything which can be done to accelerate the growth process. Of course, there are There are marginalized people who are being left out of the growth process. We should try to identify them and give them some support, which we are doing through various government programs. But now if you want to do this type of a door and say all other subsidies, as Mohan was saying, need to be rationalized and this and that, then what are we doing? So I think we are really asking the wrong questions by only focusing on practicality and affordability. We should really also focus more on the desirability of this.
Vasudeva,
whether it is going to achieve the purpose
of the
for which it is being
population,
done.
1% of the population, 1% of the population has cornered 79% of the growth. That is the growth you're talking about. And poverty is a relative concept.
Here nor there.
Some people are getting
that is not neither
richer,
here nor there.
and some people are remaining where they are. No, it's not neither here or there. Your growth has not worked well. Your growth has not resulted in distribution of wealth.
All right, gentlemen, the audience cannot understand you when you speak together.
So, very socialistic
every
argument that
year
you're
you send out $60 billion abroad.
Okay. Well,
No, it is not. Nothing wrong with socialistic thought.
To see that you've turned the socialist leaf now from your earlier days. You've suddenly become a socialist mindset.
No, I have not.
All right. This is one second. We're letting Mohammed Khan off the hook here. Really. Mohammed Khan, you will have to answer what Mr. Vasudev has said, and he basically said that this is anti-growth because while we may have the money in the system, it is not the right use of that money, and it is not a use of that money that will project growth. Professor Kumar, I see your hand go up, but as soon as Mohammed Khan has answered this question raised by Mr. Vasudev. Mohammed Khan, go ahead.
Of course, Faye, as far as I understand it, and of course the senior economists on the panel can correct me, there are competing schools of economic thought. There's developmental economics, which believes that the state has a larger duty to take care of the poor. There is the laissez-faire school of economics, which requires minimal intervention by government, and it believes that the market will correct itself. In fact, your panel is a perfect example of the two schools of thought playing out in a wonderful manner of speaking, if I may say so. However, I want to say this. Look, Arvind Subramaniam, I want to go back to the 2016 and 17 survey. What Arvind Subramaniam proposed, and remember, Faye, this report was presented in Parliament by Mr. Jaitley, so it is endorsed by the government. He proposed 7,620 rupees to 75% of the population. I don't understand why they have suddenly become Luddites and are saying that no, 6,000 rupees, which is almost 1,500 rupees cheaper, is almost 1,620 rupees cheaper, is suddenly an anathema to them. I don't understand why. The second thing I want to point out is leakages. Yes, leakages were an issue, especially with MG Narega. I remember the problem of ghosts in the system and how we worked overtime to combat it. And that is how the idea of direct benefit transfer was born in 2012, implemented by the UPA, conceived by the UPA, and unfairly and intellectually dishonestly appropriated by the BJP government. The DBT is the method by which to ensure that there are no leakages in the system. Again, koi cheez perfect nahi hoti. We have to get it there. So I am certain the Congress, which has a record of implementing the Food Security Act, the Land Acquisition Act, the 72,000 crore loan waiver to farmers, the MG Narega, I am certain if there is any party that will find a way, it is us. And I'm certain that we will present the mechanics of this in the days to come in more detail.
Faye.
Professor Kumar, go ahead.
Yeah, so, we must understand that the present crisis is a result of the fact that the unorganized sector has been very badly hit, and that's 94% of the employment. And when 94% of the people tend to lose their purchasing power, then the rate of growth of the economy comes down. And that's why the rate of growth of the economy today is not 7%, but less than 1%, because the unorganized sector data is not calculated in the government's growth projections. Now, when the rate of growth comes down, demand comes down, and when demand comes down, industrial growth slows down. So if you are able to pump in 3.6 lakh crores into the lower levels of purchasing power, then the industry will begin to do better. So in a sense, this is something that's global, and that's why globally people are talking about universal basic income, because people are realizing that when unemployment comes, then people lose income at the bottom, and there's a lot of social discontent, and demand comes down. And I remember Warren Buffett saying 6 years back that I pay a lower percentage of tax than my secretary because I have so many concessions. He said, as I earn $2 to $3 billion a year, my secretary earns only $100,000 and I pay less percentage tax. So he said the rich should pay more taxes, and that was supported by the German rich, the French rich, and the Italian rich also. And therefore, I wrote a piece in the Hindu at that time saying, what about the Indian rich? Now the time has come where we can raise resources through wealth tax, because 1% Indians have 70% of the wealth. And that growth is so concentrated in the hands of a few people that they're doing very well, the others are marginalized. So in a sense, when demand rises and when production rises, investment will also rise. So I think this kind of a scheme is worth looking at. So even though there are a lot of problems, there's problem of identification, how will you identify the people? And then the way it is structured, it's not going to be just the bottom 20%, but it's going to be more set of people, so more funds may be required. Then as you rightly said, that if somebody is at 11,000 rupees, then will it also get 12,000 and therefore cross the poverty line, much beyond the poverty line? So there are a lot of problems, but I think it's worth considering. And as Mr. Chidambaram has rightly said, it will go in phases. We'll have a pilot scheme and then we'll have other ways of looking at it. And the SEC survey can be the starting point where we identify people who are houseless, etc. Start with them and spread it further. So I think it's a possibility. And as I said, we don't have to have a higher fiscal deficit to do this, because I think growth will take time to pick up. So I don't think we are suddenly going to go from 200 lakh crore to 400 lakh crore. We are going to go slowly over there. So we need to identify resources now so the fiscal deficit doesn't rise, so that the investment on education and health doesn't fall, investment in capital items doesn't fall. So I think it has to be a balanced budget situation where we raise resources and spend better.
Okay. Okay, so let me ask this question of Mohammad Khan. Just one moment, Professor. Yes. Mohammad Khan, the Congress has spent the better part of the last 3 months talking about, even more than that, talking about the farm crisis and the job crisis and the crisis of growth in the economy. Yes. What is your solution for the farm crisis? What is your solution for the job crisis? Now, this is a quick fix method, but where are your long-term pitches? Why is it that you're going for the lowest hanging fruit here just before an election?
Actually, I know it would be tempting to call this a low-hanging fruit, but it isn't. It is actually, given the sheer size of the scheme envisaged, it would be a gargantuan task. It would involve levers and it would involve levels of government that have hitherto not existed. It would require a mammoth deployment of resources and individuals. So it's hardly a low-hanging fruit. Again, the idea is we must tackle poverty and we have to treat it as a priority, something that we feel this government doesn't do. Now, this is a solution that at best brings them out of the red zone, that brings them to a point where they can actually survive for the very basics. They don't have to hanker after the basics, right? It is after that that we build the additional tools. No one is saying that this is in derogation of or in obliviousness to other measures for growth. We're going to be coming out with our manifesto very soon. There'll be multiple sections on economic growth, for reviving the economy, for handling the farm crisis. We are not exonerating ourselves of that responsibility. We will be providing solutions to those as well. And if you like, I'm very happy to discuss those on this debate as well. For example, I'd love to talk about the fact that we would want to build cold storage facilities for farmers, bring MSP up to a point that was originally promised. We would like to talk about the fact how we'd like to restore the Land Acquisition Act to its original formulation. We'd like to talk about the fact that we want the FCI to procure food grains like it was supposed to under the Food Security Act. We can talk about all of this. And so far as jobs are concerned, of course, we can have a larger debate on jobs as well. We could talk about the fact that we would invest in large public employment programs like MG Narega, which is what happened in the New Deal under FDR after the Great Depression. There are multiple ways to proceed on this, and the Congress believes in putting these ideas forward. We don't believe in putting forward jumlas which look good on posters and are promptly forgotten by the end of the election. So I promise you, this is something that we will look at very seriously.
Mr. Gopal Agarwal, do you want to rebut?
I would like to say only 2-3 things. Issue is that all the ideas, great ideas that Mr. Mohammad Khan and Mr. Rahul Gandhi are talking, they had every time since independence to implement them. They had 60 years out of that, all 70 years since independence, and they should have implemented all these great ideas. Second thing I would like to tell you is, Mr. Khan is saying that we have done this, we have done this, we have done this, we have done the direct benefit transfer, we are talking of Manrega, everything. But for credit, they are saying that. But for poverty, for agriculture distress, for corruption, for slow growth in economy, they are not responsible. How can this be? That they have to take responsibility for the problems also. The third important thing is, and nobody is saying that we should not give benefit and take care of poor. We are for that. Our every 219 schemes are with the focus of benefiting the poor sections of the society across geography, across various segments, across caste, everything. And we have done those schemes through that. We have got the benefit for them people. What is the issue is, how do you uplift the people, poor people? They have not, I
Hey,
agree,
can I say something to him?
I am a believer that you do not just by giving out doles. No, we cannot give just doles to the poor and give them like these slogans and lift them out of poverty. If these kinds of slogans would have helped them and brought them out of poverty, 1951, 52, Mr. Nehru gave this slogan. 1971, Indira Gandhi gave this slogan. 1985, Rajiv Gandhi, Garibi Hatao. Then in 2004, Sonia ji said that, see their manifesto, they are talking of minimum guarantee schemes and in their and electrification, all these things in their manifesto in 2004. Why they didn't do it? It is our government which has brought electricity to every house. So the issue is that we have ideas in India. The question is, who will implement the willpower? It is Mr. Modi who is working day and night and working for the upliftment of poor, and therefore we are finding the results into it. The issue, another important thing is that if you want to do
can I say something to you?
Then you should give the roadmap. And if you are not giving the roadmap, it is merely a sloganing. One more last point I would like to say. He said, Mr. Khan said that SC data, we had done that survey. I tell you, that was clearly for vote bank and dividing society on caste-back politics to get votes. It has nothing to do with their upliftment. They have divided the country on minorities. They have divided the country on caste basis. They are
okay, you know what, Mr. Gopal Agarwal, you know, it is a little rich coming from you to be saying these things. Where was the blueprint to what you have promised? A quick rebuttal from Mohammad Khan, and I want to go back to my experts. Quick rebuttal to what Mr. Agarwal has said.
Gopal bhai, my deep personal affection and respect for you aside, the fact is you are literally the last government that can lecture us on economic growth, and I'll tell you why. You inherited a growth rate of 7%. You performed so badly that you had to revise and do window dressing on the numbers to present a higher number. Number two, you benefited from the lowest oil prices in 30 years at $30 a barrel while we were paying $150 a barrel. You got a windfall gain of lakhs of crores, a figure you have concealed, and we still don't know how much you made of that. And third, you had the global economy was on the rise, and yet you shot yourself in the leg with demonetization and a poorly implemented GST. If anyone, you wiped out 1 crore jobs according to CMIE from the Indian economy. Forget getting new jobs. You are the last people who can sit and lecture anyone on economic growth.
In 2014, our economy was in the fragile five.
Is so completely flawed
in
because आप हर
2014,
चीज religion के prism से देखते हैं. So your jaundiced thinking compels you to think like that. Surveys have been conducted in this country and every country since its establishment. The truth is that is how you collect data, but your jaundiced mind will only lead you to believe that it's for religious purposes. It was a socio-economic caste-based census.
In 2014, our economy was in the fragile five, sir.
All right, gentlemen.
In 2014, economy was in the fragile five.
To be fair, that question should really be answered by the other three guests.
Much better than it is now.
Okay, let me just, I think that on the panel, everyone is off the agreement on point one, that the poor should be supported, that the minimum income guarantee must be considered in order to give the poorest in our country the dignity of being able to sleep without, with a meal in their bellies, so the children are not malnourished and they can then move from there forward. The question to ask is this the scheme to do it? Do we have enough evidence from the Congress party that they have in fact thought this through and it is a scheme that will succeed? And it's not just something half-baked they've offered to the people of India in sort of a lieu of bribery to votes. yes or no answers really from my three experts. Mr. Guruswamy, do you believe we have enough evidence from the Congress party to suggest that this is the scheme to solve the problem and this is the scheme that will work? Yes or no?
Look, clearly the Congress party hasn't given it full thought, hasn't got the details worked out, and it's an election time stop, so clearly, like all politics are, so, that part is true, but clearly there is money there. We gave away last year, this government gave away 6.38 lakh crores as revenue foregone, tax concessions to large corporations, to rich people. I think there's some of these things which can be looked into and cut, and money found for poor people, for jobs for them, for upliftment of life. Lots of things can be done. But, Congress party has to work out the numbers.
Yes.
I don't know if they have the skills right now and the time right now to do it, and whether the mood in the country is willing to have a serious discussion. They should have probably come out with the scheme 6 months ago.
Absolutely.
But they didn't, and so, now it is being tossed around on the street like this.
Absolutely. Mr. Vasudev, same question to you. Do you believe that this is the scheme, in fact, to solve our problems of poverty, and do you believe that this scheme would work?
Whatever we are discussing, I think it's a classic case of politics driving economics, almost 90% or so in framing of public policy. You talked about the poor having dignity and being able to sleep with food in their stomach. That should be done, and that's why you have Food Security Act, and you have to thank the Congress government at that time to put the Food Security Act. But I am tempted to say that this particular idea, I hope it does not translate into a scheme. This idea is, instead of Garibi Hatao, it may lead to Garibi Badhao. So I am very skeptical about the economic consequences of giving doles by borrowing money for fiscal deficit and creating problems for the government, and taking the government macroeconomic indicators will get upset, you will get into a debt crisis. So you are squeezing out resources for growth, and without growth there is no poverty reduction. So instead of Garibi Hatao, it may lead to Garibi Badhao.
All right, Professor Kumar, very quickly, do you believe this scheme would work?
It has to be made to work because the poor are really suffering. How long will we keep telling the poor that you wait till the things improve for you? They waited long enough, and the demonetization and the GST have added to their miseries. So we need short-term policy measures and long-term policy measures. This is quite a short-term policy measure designed for the election purposes, but in addition, we'll have to do more. So if the scheme is launched, it has to be launched over a graded period of time with experimentation to begin with in a pilot scheme. Then when it begins to work, it has to be extended. So it has to be done in a fiscally prudent manner, and growth will increase because the purchasing power at the bottom will increase. That is what happened in 2007-8 when we gave a lot of money at the lower levels. So Indian economy continued to grow at 5%, whereas the rest of the world, the economies were in recession. So clearly there's a role to play for increasing purchasing power at the bottom and taking care of the poverty at the bottom. But we will have to continue to invest in education, in health, and increase investment in capital items. And for that, wealth taxation would be very necessary so the fiscal deficit doesn't rise and the macro balances don't go out of order. So it's a perfectly doable thing provided the political will is there.
All right, I'm going to leave this here because we've run out of time. But basically, while I thank my panelists, this is what it boils down to. Should the idea of minimum income guarantee be thought about and worked on in our country? Yes, because we must work on a system where we give the poorest in our country the basic dignity that they deserve. Is this the scheme to do it? Does this scheme give us enough information on the table to have the confidence that it would do it? Not yet. No, it doesn't. We don't know how the government of the day will go about identifying the poorest in our country. We haven't successfully been able to do it up until now. And the Congress party did not answer. Mr. Chidambaram did not answer that question today. Even if he's talking about ration cards or BPL, there has been evidence around the country of people who are fairly well-to-do who retain their ration cards or retain their cards that say they're below the poverty line because they want SOPs from the government. How will you make sure that this actually reaches those people who are really poor, who have no, right now, no bank account, they have no land on their name, they have no homes to their name? How will we make sure that this reaches them? The bigger question, of course, that has been put forward by the panel is this: what about education and health and problem solving in terms of jobs and skilling people and making sure that our farmers get their due? Those are the long-term, harder problems to solve, and those are the solutions that we would like to hear at this point. As far as this scheme is concerned, there needs to be more information handed to the general public in order for them to understand whether or not the scheme will really work. Thanks for watching.